listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday. Joining me right now is Michael Levine, and we're going to talk a little bit about trust in government. Michael, how are you?
I'm generally well. How are you?
I'm good, but I'm finding myself... Well, actually, I just got back from Israel for a week, and it's my first trip there, and it was so amazing. And then I came into Newark Airport on Sunday morning of about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and did not get back out until 1:30 a.m. on Monday. So it's been I had a lot of interesting stories for my time at Newark Airport.
What did you learn?
Well, that even among the people that work there, they really just wanted the government to end. Also, Newark, as you know, only has 2 runways, so they're trouble all the time anyway. I mean, just the least little problem backs them up. But this was a big problem with a lot of flights canceled and all that kind of stuff. So the final straw was we got on the last flight to Atlanta. We got out to the tarmac, and because there was a 2-hour wait to take off because of all the planes that were in line to take off, the pilots had to bring it back to the gate because they didn't have enough time on their clock to be able to stay in the cockpit. And so people got a little testy, let's just say that. And so we get off the plane, and people are gathering around the gate agent, and the guy's just trying to do his job, So I'm like thinking, okay, what can I do here? And there's obviously the only thing I can do is stand back and be calm. And so we sat there for about 30 minutes waiting to hear if they found us another crew. And people were getting testier and testier, but when they announced that they did get us another crew, there was a guy that had some kind of boombox with him, and he started playing Celebrate, and people started dancing around the gate. And I told the guy later when I was talking to him, I said, I think you averted some fist fights here because you played some music.
The power of humor to melt tension.
The power of keeping your sense of humor, right?
Yeah, yes.
So we've got this situation, where a bunch of elected officials who don't stop getting their salaries and who live a life where they can book themselves on 5 different flights at the same time, so they never have to wait. They do these things, and they're making decisions for us, and people don't trust them anymore. And that's a big problem. And I'm an optimist, but I'm feeling a little less optimistic at this point in time.
Well, I think you hit upon something that seems very commonsensical, which is if other people in the government payroll are not getting paid, why should they get paid?
That's right.
There is no logical explanation for that. So I would say that one of the lessons of the recent days is that immediately a bill, a law should be passed that if other people on government payroll are not paid, then elected officials are not paid. And I think that when they feel the heat, they will see the light. Mm-hmm. And but again, do I think that will happen? Of course not, because you're right. There does both seem to be, and in reality is, a somewhat privileged class of elected officials, and it's wrong.
Well, the big mistake we made is when we turned this into a job where you get benefits and thrift incentive program and retirement plan and I think when it was a true public service job where it cost you something to be elected to Congress and to go up and represent the people that you live in, that you represent. it was different. And look, I know it's a sign of age when you start talking about the good old days, but prior to something called Gramm-Rudman, which happened in the late 80s, there were lots of government shutdowns. But the rule was, the assumption was, we're going to get this together, so the government was automatically funded at current levels until they got it together.
Agreed.
And then Gramm-Rudman came along with the idea, the unintended consequence, that more accountability would be good. But on the surface, that sounds good. But what happened was, what the unintended consequence was, that a government shutdown became a political weapon instead of just something that happens every now and then. And they like using it against each other.
I think it's very well said. But again, if whatever behavior in life you want more of, I think it would be wise to reward. And whatever behavior in life you want less of, I think it would be wise to penalize. And so if you want less of a certain behavior, for the love of the Lord, why not penalize the people who are creating the behavior?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I still am optimistic enough to think that this cycle has to be close to an end, that we're in where and I think it'll end with whatever comes after Donald Trump. And I find it interesting to look at, but after being in Israel for a week, and it's my first trip to Israel, and I met Christians and Jews and Arabs, and the interesting thing is on October 7th is that Hamas thought that the Arabs inside Israel would rise up and help them. And there was a plan that was uncovered where that they articulated that. And the fact of the matter is, the Arabs that live inside Israel actually do better than Arabs anywhere else in the, quote, Arab world. And so, no, they didn't rise up. They actually helped out their Jewish neighbors. They actually did things. They joined the IDF by volunteer. They can't be conscripted, but they did things in their communities. They didn't fight, against the Israelis. And it's because they're Israelis too. This idea that they don't live in this community. And I've got to tell you, I was humbled, Michael, by the culture of service. Now, granted, I know it's 10 million people and not 330 million people, but there is a culture of service in Israel that we used to have, but we don't have anymore.
Well, one might argue that is born of prosperity. The reason that Israel is so community-minded is because they have to be. Their survival depends upon it. Americans have detached any sense of survival and community service. There's no sense among an average American that their survival depends upon it. It might be inconvenient, but there's just no sense of that. Now, we have divorced American citizens from a sense of community service for lots of reasons, and our education system might be a very good place to start. The average American, I just saw a movie the other day, which, by the way, I commend to you, called Nuremberg. Okay? Outstanding movie, Russell Crowe, really, really worth seeing. But a question for you. If we went to an average college campus in Georgia today and we said, what is Nuremberg? What percentage of college students, high school students as well, know what Nuremberg is? And the answer is likely none.
Yeah, not many.
That is true, if that is true, we are graduating high school students in Georgia in the early part of the 21st century without knowing anything about even modest modern-day history.
It's where North Georgia comes to talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
November is Lung Cancer Awareness Month, and you are aware of how lung cancer has decimated my family, and it's something close to my heart. And for many years, I have worked very hard for early detection and trying to get this message out. It is in no way putting down what we do in October for breast cancer awareness. I think that it's an amazing thing that we do, but we need to have the same kind of laser beam focus on lung cancer. And joining me right now is Heidi Onda. She's the White Women Project for Lung Cancer Awareness, and she is with us right now. Heidi, how are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Martha.
So tell us your story.
So, yes, being a lifelong health enthusiast, health educator, and a fitness trainer, married to a primary care physician, my family and I were blindsided by my stage 3A inoperable lung cancer diagnosis in October of 2018. The really scary thing about this was I didn't even have any symptoms. This was an accidental finding while investigating another health issue. A CT scan was ordered of my chest, abdomen, and pelvis, and basically it ruled out what they were looking for, and they told me, you have advanced stage lung cancer, and this looks inoperable. So even though it's stage 3, you have no biomarkers to target. So this is terminal. You should get your affairs in order. And I'm on the line talking to you today, 7 years later, because research matters. Research matters. And, being that health educator and my husband a primary care doc, we were so embarrassed that we didn't know a lot of the facts about lung cancer. We didn't know it was the number one cancer killer. We didn't know that anyone could get it, you didn't need a tobacco history to get it. We didn't know about other risk factors such as radon. And we felt there's such a lack of awareness. We can just start in our own neighborhood. Cancer centers were pushing back about doing anything, for the number one cancer killer. And that took me from being a very private, quiet, shy person to wanting to tell my story to the world, because people need to know. And people need to know that there is screening. And if you're eligible for screening, get screened. Because today, it doesn't have to be a death sentence. There is great hope, even in a late-stage diagnosis. And if you're eligible for screening, you want to know. You want to know, because if you catch it early, you could get cured.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate your story. For me, my dad died of lung cancer when I was 32. Now, his was smoking related. And, he had same kind of thing, no symptoms. And we learned from that lungs don't have a lot of nerve endings, so you don't usually have symptoms until it's much later in the diagnosis. The interesting two cases, although sad, was my mother and sister were diagnosed within 2 months of each other with stage 4 lung cancer that was adenocell carcinoma, so it was non-smoking related. And they died within 2 months of each other a couple of years later.
My gosh.
And it was, my mom's was inoperable and because she had other health problems, so treatment wasn't, typical treatment wasn't an option for her. And she was 88 years old, and not to mean that meant her life was any less valuable, but she made the decision about how she wanted her treatment to go. And my sister was 56, and she did do everything she could do, chemo, whatever the treatment was. And I think the hardest thing for her was, and I still get emotional talking about this, is that people would ask her immediately, did you smoke? As if if you smoked, you deserved this. And I think we need to change the way people look at lung cancer. And that has been my mission, for the last 30 years to be better. I've worked closely with Northeast Georgia Health System. I've been involved with the White Ribbon Project. I've pushed hard for early detection. I've had early detection myself. And, it's one of those things that has taken up my life. And I'm married to a primary care doctor, too. So,
yeah. So, yes, thank you so much for your passion and action here, because that's what we need. We work really hard to change the public perception of this disease. It really shouldn't matter how people got here, whether there was a smoking history or not. We all share in common lung cancer, and it needs to be treated like other cancers. I've, my career, throughout my career, I've been part of, prevention being defined in all other cancers as catch it early, as screening, early detection. But in lung cancer, it's been defined as don't smoke and this doesn't happen to you. And that's not true, and not everybody who smokes, who has a heavy history of smoking even gets lung cancer. So, maybe there's some sort of there's something else out there, maybe some sort of predisposition, and we don't really know what's going to trigger it, in some people. And the point is, we need to get people screened, There's 16 million people eligible for screening in this country, and now it's 18% of those people who are eligible are getting screened. We need to do much, much better than this.
Well, and I think that the other part of it is I technically didn't qualify for early screening, or preventative screening, but I went ahead and had it done because my doctor recommended it. He says, look, we don't have a tie to hereditary nature of lung cancer, but in your case, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea. So I went ahead and I paid for it myself. My insurance now covers it, but in the past it didn't. And it's gotten to the point now where I'm 2 years in between screenings just to be sure. And there's some question. You mentioned radon. We don't know this in the case of my mom and my sister, but the hypothesis is that maybe there was radon in the neighborhood that we grew up in.
Yeah, and that's very possible. It turned out that we didn't know about it either. And when we had to tell our 3 adult children that I had lung cancer, their heads were spinning because they never had junk food in this house. They had to exercise. And they're like, how on earth could mom have lung cancer? And our son, though, is an environmental engineer, and the first question out of his mouth was, well, what's the radon of the house? And coming from Southern California initially, we never heard of radon. And we never even heard about it in Colorado when we bought our first home back in 1994. And we tested, and we were twice the level of actionable. We got the house mitigated right away. And you know what I worry about today is my children spent so much more time in the basement than I did. And they could be walking around with this right now, and they are not eligible for screening. But like you just demonstrated, if you advocate for yourself, you let your, physician know, your care team know that this is a concern and this is why, they probably could get screened, but yes, they would have to pay for it.
Well,
and then for the people who are eligible, we want them to get screened, because they'll be covered.
Well,
and hopefully caught early.
And absolutely. And one of the things I had a doctor ask me, aren't you worried about the radiation from the screening? I said, no, I'm worried about stage 4 lung cancer. And that's what I'm worried about. And so, everything is managing risk, right? Everything is risk. There might be a little slight risk of me doing these additional screens, but I've seen what happens when lung cancer goes undetected till it's stage 4, and I don't want that to happen to me. And if there's anything that I can do to prevent that, I'm going to do it.
Yes, absolutely. And our hope is that, research will get us to the point, because I know this is being worked on, some sort of blood-based, tumor marker to be able to detect, this. So people could get, hopefully, universal screening. Like, for example, mammograms. You don't have to have any special, eligibility other than your age, and if you have a family history, you get to start younger. The same thing with colonoscopy. This should be the same thing with lung cancer.
Absolutely.
But, if we had a method that was less controversial, and let's say everybody could get a blood test or a urine test or something, and then if something shows up there, then get the CT scan. So, we want to see advancement in research along the whole continuum of lung cancer, from screening and early detection, better methods, through more treatment options, and through survivorship, because many of us now are living longer, and we're experiencing toxicities of some of the treatments that we were on or the radiation that we had. And talk about radiation from a low-dose CT scan. That's nothing compared to, high-dose precision radiation, 30 treatments I had to have to my chest. So,
yes.
Which has now caused a heart problem, 7 years later.
So two more questions for you. There was a friend of mine who was diagnosed at the same time as my sister, and that's how they got to know each other, and they became great friends. And Linda died, my sister, after 2 years, and Starlet is still alive. I mean, she responded well to the new treatments that they had, and she's now been able to have a long, this was 2008. She's had a long time. She's seen her grandchildren grow up. She's had such a great quality of life. And, because it is the practice of medicine for a reason, Heidi. Everybody doesn't respond the same way.
Correct. correct. I've seen that a lot. In fact, I just lost a friend on Sunday night who had one of these targetable mutations and never responded to that treatment, and had a very, very, rough time, with progressions and complications, and, was probably about 18 months from the time she was diagnosed to the time she died. And then I know other people who are like super responders and who are out there like 10, 15 years now, and still experiencing some toxicities from these, treatments, but are doing just what you said, experiencing the things in life that are important to them, children graduating high school or college and weddings and grandchildren. So there is great hope, but we do need to figure out why are some people, doing well and others aren't. And that's part of why I am so passionate about what I do. I mean, I am no evidence of disease now for about 6 years, since completing my immunotherapy treatments after chemoradiation. And I feel well, and I'm doing well, and I'm going to keep doing this until I can't anymore. It's like, why am I here and others not?
That's right.
We need to do better.
Right.
We need to do
now,
better.
You are also a co-founder of the White Ribbon Project, and I have participated in some of the things that Angie Caton has done at Northeast Georgia Health Systems. I took my mother-in-law to help a couple of years ago when Chris was here working on that. I've got a white ribbon in my office, and so tell us a little bit about the White Ribbon Project.
Yeah, so the White Ribbon Project was, not planned at all. It was a knee-jerk reaction one day to just being so frustrated that, all these people are dying. It's the number one cancer killer, and no one's talking about this disease. And I asked my husband, out of frustration, to please make me a big white ribbon out of wood that I could throw on the front door and at least educate my neighborhood that I had lung cancer, I wasn't ashamed of it, and we need to talk about it. One picture on social media went viral, and before we knew it, there were patients and caregivers and people in the medical and science community reaching out from all over the country for these ribbons. At our own expense, we were making them and sending them to people because I thought, wow, if someone wants to talk about this, why would you want a 2-foot-tall white ribbon by 1 foot wide screaming lung cancer awareness if you were ashamed of this disease? And I thought maybe this has been the missing piece all along, that this community didn't have something to rally around. They didn't have something to help them have the confidence to stand up and tell their story. And we work very hard we don't want to change the face of lung cancer because that makes people with smoking histories feel not part of this movement. We want people to understand that people with smoking histories are humans. They are good people. They are mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and aunts and uncles and, teachers and lawyers and even people in the medical community. They have an identity. They are not smokers. They are people who had a tobacco history or have a tobacco history.
Well, it always frustrated me that, we don't want to talk to Uncle Joe about his drug and alcohol problem, but boy, if someone lights up a cigarette, we're going to make them feel like they're the worst person in the world. Or in my case, I'm a fitness trainer and a health educator. And so what am I going to do? Shake my finger at people who have food addictions, Yes.
or, I can get them to move for an hour. They're under my control for that hour. But after that, I don't know what they're going to do in terms of nutrition. And it's not easy to change behavior. And with smoking, it's an addiction. These are addictions. We need to have empathy and compassion for people.
Absolutely.
And we need to get them proper care.
Absolutely. Heidi Onda, thank you so much for being with us today. If in your own community, wherever you're listening to this, if you have concerns, talk to your primary care physician, raise those concerns. In our own community at Northeast Georgia Health System, we have a fantastic early screening program. We have worked very hard to have it, and there are lots of resources right here in this community. Heidi, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Martha, and I appreciate so much your advocacy. You are saving lives. You are saving lives.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Lisa Eckman is here with me today, and she has a great X handle called Deprogramming Democrats. and de-educating the elites or something like that. Lisa, it's blocked on your thing, and my email went down, so I couldn't pull up the email you sent me. But Lisa, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm doing great, Martha. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. They created this idea that in order to know what you're talking about, you have to be educated in the systems that they put together, and then you get educated in the things that they want to educate you about. And the biggest thing that they educate you about is don't question authority and don't question the experts. Well, they get to tell you who's an expert and who you don't get to question, and that's sort of a self-fulfilling circle. And it has led to this real elitism on the left, where they believe they're morally and intellectually superior, and it has really created a lot of problems in our country.
And it's deprogramming Democrats and uneducating the elites. And Lisa, tell folks a little bit about your story before we talk a little more about this topic.
Sure. I was an advocate and a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for 20 years. I worked for a political appointee at the tail end of the Clinton administration when I first arrived in Washington. I worked in the United States Senate for a couple of Democratic senators, and then I also worked for nonprofits and government contractors, and really saw Washington change substantially over those 20 years in some of the worst ways that we now see, that is so divided and so putting partisan politics over what is really good for the country and good for our republic. And so I woke up in 2020 when I saw the government response to COVID basically eviscerating our God-given rights that are enshrined in our Constitution, especially the First Amendment, and decided that I needed to do something to try to help save the country that I love. And that prompted me to write the book, Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elites.
So when you look at a guy like John Fetterman, because we talk about him a lot. I mean, I'm a conservative talk show host. I think I'm reasonable, though. I think that I show both sides, and you know, when I'm old enough that people used to value that. I think they still do. I think they're just the loud voices, like the social media voices are just very loud. But you got a guy like John Fetterman who, my take is, he understands he's in a purple state, and so that means he can't be straight down the line, hardline Democrat. And so he takes some positions that might surprise the average Democrat.
Yeah, I think that is in part true. I think he also, he decided also, I think maybe just to have some courage and know that he may get primaried, which that may happen, and the party may primary him. But I think I think a lot of people, even if they are part of the machine, may be waking up to the fact that we're pushing our republic exactly where our founders didn't want us, and that's where factions are really tearing at the fabric, and having people forget what we have in common and what we all share as Americans. And I think he decided it was worth it to take a stand.
So how big of an impact do you think it is that, up until like the mid-1990s, maybe to 2000, one thing that people that served in Congress had in common is almost all of them had military service. I mean, and so they had that common thread of getting together. And there certainly weren't as many women, which I'm glad there's more women. But you can still have women that served, like Joni Ernst and others. But now it seems like there are those factions. You know, there's not as much, there's more service than there used to be. But do you think that has something to do with it? Because Democrats and Republicans, even if they had different views on things, because they had that common experience of being in the military together, they were a lot more respectful.
I think that may be a part of it. I think there are a few things that have really happened. And, you were talking about the loud social media voices. I think social media has a lot to do with it, actually, also. I think we're encouraged to, we hear from the people who are the farthest on the fringe and can be the loudest. And social media also created the ability for average people to create significant consequences by doxing and swatting and all the things and canceling that has been going on. since the advent of social media. I also do think, even though in full disclosure I worked on his first campaign, I think President Obama led us in a bad direction towards pulling us apart as opposed to bringing us together. I had a lot of hope for him when he first ran, and I think he really had a destructive effect on our unity as a country. And I think that people with the advent of social media also started to wear their politics on their sleeves, and we started to see the real rise of identity politics. And so used to be, I think, too, and this I saw this in the Senate in the different times that I worked there, it used to be you maybe didn't even know who your neighbor voted for, but you saw them at the church picnic, or you saw them at the high school football game, or you were on the bowling league with them, and we bonded around what we had in common as opposed to focusing really on what is different about us. And I think that the further you get away from people who have served, and with the indoctrination going on in our schools that's very anti-American, the harder it becomes for us all to focus on the greatness of the American experiment, and people can forget, what has been sacrificed in order to protect our freedom and defend our liberty.
Well, I tell you, I'm glad you mentioned President Obama, because I have, I kind of think Obama and Trump are two sides of the same coin. I think that President Obama people wanted him to be changed and different and hope and all of that, but he actually was a kind of a big bureaucrat. I mean, he liked doing things the old way. He liked making money the old-fashioned way. You know what I'm saying? It's like, he didn't turn out to be as different as people thought he would be as far as how he governed. And so Trump came along with this populist message that was not that unsimilar to what Obama was talking about, but in practice, was not how Obama governed. And then President Trump, of course, I think he's better in his second term than he was in his first term. But it is a fast-moving situation that I think you've seen, even with the shutdown, that Democrats are having a hard time keeping up with.
Yeah, I think, part of what I say, and my book is Deprogramming Democrats, because that's the experience that I come from, Martha. But I think the establishment in Washington, D.C. is just way, way too powerful. The parties are way too powerful. There is a deep state, and I think it goes deeper than even President Trump realized in his first term. And it's really hard to break free from that deep state. And I think in part, at the moment, our voter registration in terms of declared Democrats and Republicans is extremely low. And we have a lot of people who don't find really a home in either one at this point very easily. And I think that is a challenge, for our system, because we do just have these two parties. And our founders warned us about the danger of factions very strongly. And that, if we get too divided, it's really hard for our country to stand. A divided house does not stand. And so I think that, there is a really strong reaction in the country about people not feeling heard by our elected representatives, and people feeling like they are not representing actually their constituents. And I think the other factor that I think is important to keep in mind is just how the influx of money into our political system has really changed the ability of the average person to get their elected representatives to hear them. Would it surprise you to know that $4.6 billion was spent on lobbying last year in 2024, and close to $20 billion was spent on our federal elections? I mean, that's really hard noise to overcome with the voice of a voter. And I think that what we see with sort of these what you think of as outside of the establishment candidates is people wanting something different, wanting to be heard, when most of the country doesn't want any more wars, yet we still seem to keep starting them because no one is listening to the voter. That's, I think, how you get these reactions outside of the establishment.
So Lisa Eckman, you can follow her on X at Deprogrammed Dem. The book is Deprogramming Democrats. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and have a great day.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.